In this part, we will engage with agroecology as a stolen concept. I'm Rory, and I worked on Schiermonnikoog in the town of naast de Branding, and I'm here with...
I'm Jinsu, and I work in the Bistorf next to Nijmegen. And
I am Hanikeshwa. I worked at Tundra het Lichtfen at Bennekom.
As you heard in previous parts, agroecology was formulated from bottom-up peasants' movement as a proposal towards food sovereignty. Social movements like Via Campesina develop agroecology and mention it as a science, a practice, and a movement. As you have heard in previous parts, as such, agroecology consists of interdependent principles. The problem we looked into is the use or adaptation of agroecology in policy or companies, but also in academia, but only in a narrow way, taking particularly the agrarian practices. In this way, the interdependent set of principles is broken up, often at the cost of socio-political outlooks of agroecology as a movement. As a consequence, the transformational power of the proposal of agroecology and the movements using it to structurally change the agri-food system is diminishing. This can be seen by the adaptation of agroecology by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Also, in academic fields, agroecology is studied as a kind of organic way of farming without any contextualization to its socio-political outlook. While working on the farms, we felt the issue was quite abstract compared to the everyday challenges the farmers were dealing with. I worked on Schiermonnikoog, an island in the Netherlands with 900 inhabitants, of which 7 farmers. All of these farmers are dairy farmers and export the milk to the mainland. The farm I worked is the only one producing vegetables and fruits on and for the island. Janneke, the farmer I worked with, told me that their work is not recognized as farming by the municipality, actually, but that at the same time they used the tuin naast de Branding, so the farm I worked at, to advertise the island for tourism. This for me is sort of greenwashing on a local level. Now let's listen to some parts of our conversations with the farmers we worked with and see how we can link their experiences with the issue of the partial use of the principles of agroecology. Okay, Shivai, you're first.
Yeah, thank you, Rory. I worked at Tundra, as I said before. My farmer was Chris. He follows agroecology in a quite broad way, I think. One thing my farmer said was that he wants to build an autonomous identity rather than relying on companies for the farm inputs. Making small-scale enterprises of composting and wood mulch, along with introducing like educational programs in the future, can increase the agroecological concepts. He was also interested in changing the common agricultural policies in Europe before switching to farming. Chris says that policy making is an interesting model, but it is difficult to implement on the farm because farmers don't really take policies into consideration and they want money out of their harvest. But what I saw with my farmer Chris, that he's more concerned with seeing how it is practically viable or feasible to implement the policies on our farm. And I think that's the reason why Chris chose to transition to agroecological farming.
Yeah, agroecology is the reason I started farming. So that framework was something I was working with before. Yeah. And so at that point I was more connected with, of course, with the ecological side of things on the land, so the principles behind how you're growing food in this way, those really spoke to me, and it just makes sense to me actually as a system, trying to minimize external inputs and to understand from natural ecosystems how things work and use that knowledge within a farming ecosystem. So it's very heavily man-managed because we are there working, we are sowing seeds that we bring in from elsewhere, we're hand transplanting, but it's still an ecosystem, and we can manage it like an ecosystem rather than like a factory, which is what industrial agriculture, I feel, became. And they often see soil as a substrate within which to produce their profitable product. And for us, actually, the soil is part of your natural capital, which you can build upon. So that's what attracted me about the concept of agroecology. And I find it, on the one hand, there is this image of agroecology that it's old-fashioned, it's kind of working on traditional practices, but I see it as the other way around.
Yeah. Now I'll hand it over to Jinsu.
Yep. Thank you, Keshava. As I already told you, I was working in the Westerhof, it's next to Nijmegen, and I was interviewing Howard, know really well about agroecology. And the most impressive part from my interview was Howard didn't reject or deny the current food system or current food chain. But meanwhile, there was also the point that the term of agroecology is often adopted without the broader social and political part that it was originally meant to represent.
Anybody can say they're regenerative. Anybody can say they're agroecological. Because what is agroecological? There's no hardcore certified definition with a checklist that makes you agroecological or not. Yep. So that's where the space is for growth and for diversity. It's in the fact that there's no hard definition, but there's also space for greenwashing and abuse of it. And we see that a lot with regenerative agriculture now, that like all the big companies, Bayer is now also making regenerative products.
Oh yeah.
One of the interesting points from him is that he doesn't see the lack of strict definition of agroecology entirely negative. According to Howard, it was agroecology to remain diverse and adaptable. Unlike organic farming, agroecology has no universally accepted certification, This openness allows for diversity, but it also creates space for greenwashing. As Howard mentioned, the large company like Bayer can adopt the language of agroecology or regenerative agriculture without touching its broader social and political values behind agroecology. But in my interview, this is exactly where co-optation happening. He mentioned as greenwashing, but this makes it shift from transforming the food system to simply marketing product with a good-looking name like green or regenerative. But his response was not to reject conventional system completely. Instead of this, he mentioned building parallel system several times. One of the example of Bistov was how his farm negotiated with a food distributor to sell his new pasta to Nijmegen Hospital. Well, there was already a company and hospital in the existing system. Rather than refusing to work with existing market, they negotiated with hospital and food distributor and successfully reduced the commission to distributor from 35% to 5%. But how does it work? Instead of sending his new pasta to distributor, it's not on his way to go to Nijmegen. Directly send his pasta directly to Nijmegen, and Nijmegen and the distributor just making a receipt. And 35% commission, he cannot sell that one to student and the customer, but 5% is acceptable for him. Agroecology for Howard is not about escaping the existing system magically overnight. It's about gradually creating alternative economic and social relationship that can continuously change it. So, agroecology is not only a fancy farming technique, but also a movement for structural change, slowly and steady. And I want to finish my part with what Howard frequently mentioned. I don't think we are ready to back down the current system, but we need to build this parallel system. So, can you conclude what we talked, Rory?
Yeah. Well, as a conclusion of reflection we had is that our farmers not necessarily subscribe to the principles that strictly, but in their farming practice use a mix of practices and insights that suits them. And even though they don't say they farm agroecological like my farmer Janneke, we can also say that each of them got into farming out of ideological reasons to make a change in the world in a way they could. But even in this aspect, they each have very diverse ways towards this. What we notice by looking into the issue of the partial use of the interdependent set of principles of agroecology is that the main struggle at the moment maybe is not the different uses of agroecology, but the mushrooming of all kinds of labels and terms like regenerative agriculture that take over the space in the discourse of how to change the agri-food sector.